Thank you, Jessica and Anne-Marie and John, and good afternoon, everyone. It's the last official talk of the day, so we appreciate you sticking around to hear about our right whales. So I want to say, first of all, that we're really honored and excited to be here at the symposium, and that we have had the chance to share with you the story of our imperiled North Pacific right whales. And John, Anne-Marie, and Jessica gave you the history and the background and our current science on this species, so I'm going to talk to you about how we can try to get it right with recovery. So the largest threat that we have seen to large whales was commercial whaling. And other large whale species have shown signs of post-whaling recovery, such as the southern right whale you can see here with not one, but actually two calves. North Atlantic right whales did begin to increase in population size, doubling from about 250 individuals in the 1990s to almost 500 in around 2010. But now, new threats, entanglements, and vessel strikes have caused that population to decline again. As Jessica mentioned, there's so much basic population information about North Pacific right whales that we just don't know. And that means that we also don't know much about their threats and how those threats may be impacting recovery. The recovery plan for North Pacific right whales came out 10 years ago in 2013. And unlike some other recovery plans that have a lot of very specific activities and goals, the goal of ours was simply to collect data on the seasonal movements and habitat use of this species. Because once we had this information, we could start looking at population trends and abundance, and then we could start looking at their different threats and start to address them, both anthropogenic and natural. But 10 years later, we haven't even addressed this first recovery strategy, and there's still a lot that we don't know. So I'm going to walk through some of the threats that we think may be impacting recovery, just to demonstrate how little we know about this species. Vessel strikes are a threat to marine mammals worldwide, and especially large whale species. We have no evidence of vessel strike mortality or injury in North Pacific right whales, so I've demonstrated what can happen to large whales when there are vessel strikes. But we do know that North Pacific right whales like to hang out in areas where there are a lot of vessels. So as you see, the critical habitat in the black polygons on this figure show that they tend to spend a lot of time in the southeastern Bering Sea, as well as off the coast of Kodiak Island. If we overlay that and we look at some of the vessel traffic in that area, with Unimak Pass and the Aleutian Islands being marked with a star, we see that there's a lot of vessel traffic that goes through these critical habitat areas along the Great Circle route. So even though we don't have the evidence to show that vessel strikes are an issue, we know that it's very likely due to the overlap between where the right whales are and where the vessels are going. Entanglements were not even listed as a threat in the recovery plan, unless it was in the context of marine debris. And to date, we only have evidence of 2 right whales in our catalog that have entanglement scars. This individual was sighted off of Haida Gwaii in 2013, and this individual was sighted off of California in 2017. And I would like to thank Dr. Michael Moore, who we heard from this morning, and Amy Knowlton for their help in identifying that these are very likely entanglement scars on this individual. We're also seeing bowhead whales in the Bering Sea start to become entangled in crab pot fishing gear. And this is an area where bowheads and North Pacific right whales overlap, so this leads to the thought that we may be starting to see some entanglements in that area with North Pacific right whales. On the western side of the Pacific, off of Russia, Japan, and South Korea, we know that right whales do get entangled quite frequently. And the drone footage in the left and center panels show scars of what we believe were previous entanglements. And in 2013, this individual whale, which, apologies for the poor quality of the photo, but you can see that that's a right whale fluke that is severely entangled in aquaculture gear. Aquaculture is becoming much more popular in the waters of Alaska, which leads us to think that this could become a much bigger threat moving forward. Anthropogenic noise is everywhere, and we've heard quite a bit about that in some previous talks today. And in the Alaska part of the range, we know that ship noise and also oil and gas development and exploration, as well as potentially some sonar from Navy ships and such, are probably the biggest sources of noise. And in the upper left figure, you can see tracks from a geophysical survey that actually started in North Pacific right whale critical habitat, which is in blue, and traveled through areas that we know right whales do hang out because we have acoustic detections as well as visual sightings, including the 4 individuals that Jessica was fortunate to see earlier this year. So as we see ship noise increase and potentially new oil and gas exploration, this is going to continue to be a persistent threat. Jessica gave some great information about how climate change is influencing prey species, so I just want to reiterate that we know that when we have more ice and we have colder waters, we tend to see more abundant big fat copepods that the North Pacific right whales like to feed on. And when things get warmer, we see more of the smaller copepods and we see differences in where they are occurring. So this is going to influence right whale habitat and also what other threats they might be put in touch with depending on where they are. Marine debris is a sort of a triple threat. So first you have ghost gear, which can be an entanglement threat. You can have ingestion, and the picture on the top left shows marine debris that was found in a stranded southern right whale in 2014. And then you have microplastics. And this figure from the University of British Columbia demonstrates how different members of the food web can be influenced or affected by microplastics. And filter feeders such as right whales can consume them directly from the water column and from their prey. And microplastics have the added complication of plastic-associated toxins and contaminants, which at high enough levels could potentially be a problem. We've heard a little bit about harmful algal blooms. Well, these are definitely increasing in the Arctic, and the figure on the left shows the harmful algal cyst concentrations, and we see hotspots in the Chukchi Sea and moving down into the Bering Strait region. And Kathy Lefay et al. In 2022 sampled bowhead whales and walruses and found concentrations of saxitoxins, which are the individuals that are colored. And we know that bowhead whales, North Pacific right whales are moving up towards the Bering Strait where the walruses were sampled and thus could be overlapping with some of these harmful algal blooms. And as Francis mentioned this morning, we know that right whales are subject to those harmful algal bloom toxins when about 28 of them passed away or washed up on the shore on Argentina last year due to a sudden and severe increase in toxic algae in their environment. The last threat that I want to talk about is predation. And this was listed as a low impact threat in our recovery plan. But we have been seeing incredibly increasing evidence of bowhead whales on the left and gray whales on the right that are subject to orca predation in Alaskan waters. And in fact, we do have some evidence on at least one of our North Pacific right whales of orca rake marks on their flukes. And as we see species moving into different areas and overlapping in ways that they did not before, predation could become a bigger issue. And hopefully the orcas do not find that right whales are also the right whale to hunt for them. So hopefully this discussion of threats has shown you that there's a lot that we still don't know. And though we can assume that these threats are impacting recovery, we don't have enough information in most cases. And these are threats that they experience throughout their entire range across the 5 states in the 3 different countries that John, Jessica, and Anne-Marie talked about. So how can we proceed with recovery with such little information? One of the tools we have under the Endangered Species Act is designation of critical habitat. And so we have these 2 areas that were identified in 2008, and we were petitioned last year to expand and revise this critical habitat. We just released our determination in September that we will be moving ahead with a revision, and we're going to be looking at acoustic information in combination with prey data, oceanographic data, and sightings data to look for areas that we can identify as meeting the definition of critical habitat. Now, the petitioners had wanted us to essentially combine these areas all along the Alaska Peninsula. And at this time, we don't know if the areas that we identify are going to be within the suggested area, but we do know that we're going to be identifying it based on the best available science. We hope to have a proposed rule out, and we will be having that open for public comment in the future. Another tool we have for all listed species is their 5-year review, where we look at the most recent science and decide if their listing status should change. Our 5-year review is almost complete. It has the latest and greatest science and information and is under review at NOAA Fisheries headquarters. We're hoping it'll be out early next year, but I can give you a spoiler alert, they are still endangered. Other non-ESA tools that we have are outreach and collaborations, and I want to expand on an example that Jessica gave about the 2 right whales that were seen north of Unimak Pass in February of last year. So this came in from cod fishermen who had been out on the water for 40 years and saw whales that they didn't recognize. So they took videos and photos and sent them to the Alaska Department of Fish and Game in Dutch Harbor. They weren't really sure what they were looking at either, so they sent the information to us. And we were able to say, yes, these are right whales. And not only are they right whales, they're feeding right whales in February. And this is the first visual evidence we have of them in this area. So we were very excited. And we wanted to make sure that people knew that they were there. So the Coast Guard offered to put out a call to mariners so that when vessels came within a certain area, they received a message saying that they're endangered North Pacific right whales, please slow down, and please report them if you see them. So that's what happened. They sent the message out, and this polygon shows where that message was distributed. And even though we're talking about February in the Bering Sea, which is a very unforgiving place, there are still quite a few vessels. So it was really great for us to be able to make these connections and have this collaboration that went across federal and state agencies and incorporated cooperation with our partners in the commercial fishing industry. So outreach is really our biggest tool right now. We are trying to reach a diversity of audiences, which is why we're incredibly grateful for the opportunity to be here at this symposium. My colleagues and I are planning to go up to the Bering Strait region next year to work with some of the local communities that have had reports of North Pacific right whales in the past. And as we know they're moving further north, building strong relationships with these communities will be very important for reporting sightings. And as we've said before, this is not just an Alaska problem. The map on the right shows the sightings that we've had since 1970. And so we need to be working outside of Alaska to raise awareness about this species and let folks know that there is in fact a right whale in the North Pacific, and get the public involved and get them excited. The pictures on the bottom show a right whale that was sighted off of Monterey Bay by a whale watching vessel. And we were lucky enough that the folks on the boat knew they were looking at something different and contacted NOAA Fisheries. But this isn't always the case. This individual here was originally identified as a gray whale based on this photograph. But drone footage that showed up about a week later showed the very distinctive V-shaped blow that we know indicates that it's a right whale. But by the time we received this information, it was too late to go and find the animal and collect some of the very important information we need, such as photographs, biopsies, and other samples. So this is really a missed opportunity because folks just don't know that there are right whales and what they look like. So what can you do to help with North Pacific right whales? Oh, there we go. Spread the word and keep your eye out. If you happen to be out in the water on the West Coast, please look for things like a lack of a dorsal fin, these paddle pectoral fins that they have, and they're very smooth, deep V-notch tails. They have all these white bumps called callosities on their snouts, and again, that distinctive V-shaped blow. And any potential any sightings can be reported to this email address here, or you can reach out to Jessica, myself, or anybody at NOAA with this information. Obviously, we face a lot of challenges, and as you've heard from my colleagues, a lack of resources such as dedicated ship time are really hindering our ability to get the information that we need. And they live in a vast habitat with a lot of obstacles that Anne-Marie shared with you. And in this case, we're essentially looking for 50 tiny needles in the giant haystack of the North Pacific Ocean. But despite this, we're really excited because we've had a lot of sightings, including the 4 individuals just seen in September. And this has really invigorated NOAA Fisheries to push forward with our efforts in science management and outreach. And as Jessica mentioned, these animals seem healthy and robust, and there have been signs of reproduction. So this definitely is a good sign for recovery of the population. By telling our story on stages such as these, we hope to learn from the expertise and experience of other endangered species efforts, and that will allow us to build a strong and successful recovery program for the severely endangered eastern North Pacific right whale. With that, I would like to thank you all for your attention, and I believe we will be taking questions now. Thank you.